Okay. Well, let me take this opportunity to welcome you guys to the start of the next 5.5 weeks of drugs and crime. And I will be providing information for you guys uh, on Tuesdays. Today, obviously, I didn't start on Tuesdays because your classes didn't start till Wednesday. So I wanted to make sure that we take this first week, and this first week is really a combination. I'll go over a little bit of the assignments, but I will be concentrating on the requirements for the course. So this will be what I can refer to as an open house, and you'll have an opportunity to be able to learn what my expectations are. Um, this is going to be a pretty interesting course, pretty cool course. There's a lot of things going on with drugs and crime, and you'll hear me talk about that throughout the quarter. You'll hear me talk about personal experiences. You'll hear me talking about my professional experiences that you'll learn more about me. You've already learned some if you looked at the student lounge, but you'll learn even more about me today as I end with about a 10 to 15 minute um, introduction to who I really am. So let's just jump right in, and I'm going to share my screen with you. And at the beginning, you can see my name. You see my phone number, 630-660-8480. And you see this little line here. Trust me, those of you who are former students in other classes know that this means what it says. It says students can feel free to call me, text me, email me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. And the 25th hour of the day is highlighted. And you figure that one out for yourself. I've had some students who think that that's 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning. I said, that is not it. It's the 25th hour of the day. If you do it the 25th hour of the day, I will not get your message. I will not respond to it. And the bottom line is that you'll figure that one out. Now, when you text me, please do me a favor and include your name and your class that you're in, because I have 5 classes I teach, and I may not know, who you are. I'll learn who you are. And usually I'll learn who you are for one or two reasons. Either you're doing exceptional work or you are not doing exceptional work. The ones in the middle I don't get to know so well. But what I was getting ready to say is that, and then I'll know several of you from previous classes, which is a good thing because you know how I operate. And you will find that I'm one of the professors that is probably the most accessible professor that you'll ever have, because my goal is to make sure that you guys are successful. We only have 5.5 weeks to do this in, and the workload is really not as bad as some might think it would be. However, it is so important that you pay attention. So now let's just keep moving forward. And so pay attention to the home page, especially on this side. It gives you some very valuable information. Like, for example, you are reminded that you're required to conduct research for all papers. That means that the textbook cannot be the sole source, or you'll lose 2 points for failure to conduct research. That's also reflected in the rubric as well, which we're going to go over in a few minutes. All written assignments, I said all written assignments, should be in APA format. That means citations in the body, and I mean citations throughout the paper. Don't just throw me a citation here and one there, because citations provide support for the statements that you provide in your papers, and it gives credibility because you guys are not experts in this area. And so even as an expert, If I take a source, I'm going to use that information. Even if I put it in my own words, I'm still going to indicate where I got that information. And so the APA format is the format that we utilize in this school. And that means citations in the body of the paper and references at the end. Then you will lose 1 point for not providing a cover sheet for all written assignments. All this is rolled over into the rubric as well. Then I've provided for you some helpful resources. You have your advisors to fall back on for questions that might concern not the course itself, but might concern some issues that you might have technical issues. You're going to contact personal support, PSC. The number is given at the home page at the bottom of every course. And so you want to make sure that you utilize your advisors. If you have health issues and you need some medical leave, contact your advisors. Don't wait too late. If there's a problem with the course and you're falling too far behind, students sometimes will try to make up work, but personally, you're not really maximizing the profit, the money that you pay for. The key thing in all courses is to work contemporaneously with the weeks of the assignment. Now, there's at least one person that I know of who has already told me that they're not going to be able to do a certain week because of a pre-planned vacation. And I always tell students, I says, well, do the best you can. Listen to me, guys. When I go on vacations, I take my laptop with me anyway. And then I take some part of my vacation, whether it's 15 minutes or an hour each day, to try to get things done. But that's just me. Now, some people, they say they can't do it. Well, almost everywhere I go, I don't go to many places where I can't have access to the internet. Anyway, so you don't want to fall behind in assignments. So anyway, there's some links here that provide information to explain peer mentors versus tutoring, student success guide to help you be successful, some library questions, the writing guide, and then the Library and Learning Center resource guide. And then there will be other resources that are in the module itself. And then we talk about tutoring assistance. Tutoring is not just for students who are struggling. Tutoring is also something that can help you sharpen your skills in certain areas. And please, if you're having problems with your writing, it is important to utilize the writing lab. And if you use the writing lab, you should already know this, that there's a 24 to 48 hour turnaround time for your papers, and you want to make sure that you comply with those. The key thing is this, is get your papers in on time and follow the rubric. You'll be successful. I've had several students already who took me up on it, and they got hundreds. And not because of the fact that at the end of the quarter, I didn't realize. I said, oh, wow, they've been doing everything right. At the end of the quarter, when I saw the final grade, it was 100 for at least, I had at least 2 students that did that. Then there's some articles that I provide. You click on these links to help you how to go beyond the textbook, which is what you're going to be doing quite frequently. Analytical tips for criminal justice. Importance of information literacy, being able to find information, being able to research it. Referencing. Then we get into the APA and then annotated bibliography, which you won't be dealing with too much here. And then one of the critical skills, one of the transferable skills, critical thinking. Critical thinking. There's a video in here that you can click on, and you can look at that. You're going to hear me talk about critical thinking a lot. Critical thinking is one of my favorite of the transferable skills, which I'll be talking about in detail in a few minutes. And then your grades will be by rubric. Your rubrics themselves for the written assignment, which is the course project, you're going to see, is located in each weekly assignment. Then there's a discussion post in which there is a rubric. The key thing with discussions is make sure that your discussions are detailed, that you satisfy the requirements of what the discussion forum is calling for, that you got it in on time. Otherwise, you would lose points. And if you try to get a discussion post submitted after the discussion forum has ended, and you'll discover in a minute, but I'll tell you now that the discussion forum ends actually technically Saturday night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, when your reply posts are due, with the exception of the last week. But at any rate, the key thing is that you want to get your discussion posts in on time. You want to make sure that you get them done. Your discussion posts for this week, since class started yesterday, was yesterday. So you want to make sure you got those discussion posts in. And if you followed what my welcome email is, which we're going to show you in a minute, it tells you to check your calendar frequently. And then each week we will have a live lecture. Now, pay attention. Pay close attention to your calendar about this, because this course, because of the way it started, the first one will be taking place right now, and it's an open house. Notice this: weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5 will take place starting next Tuesday, 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. And I'll be keeping that time frame pretty close to time, and sometimes even before that, but very close to it. Except week 6. Week 6 lecture will take place the Friday, June 8th, which by the time we get there, and it'll come so fast that you won't even, remember, that's less than a month from now, basically, the way it operates. But then you got so many weeks. You'll see if you look at your calendar, June 8th is week 5. So I'll have 2 lectures in week 5, basically. Lecture for week 5 and week 6, which will be that Friday night. That's the only Friday night lecture that we will do. And then today is the only Thursday night lecture that we will do. You must attend the lecture or listen to the archive. There will be a keyword or phrase that you will be required to provide. Now, if you provide that, it will have to be provided by the Sunday after the lecture, as your assignments are due. After that, you lose points. Then there's a section under here, recording. I will archive and have the links here, as I will be sending them to each of you as well. So today's open house, once this is completed, I will add this to the course homepage. So the course homepage is very, 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 very important. Now, there's some announcements here. The new box grading system, which really doesn't apply anymore because of the fact that it's not new anymore, but this is something that you can take a look at on your own. And then the writing process. This is something that I provide for you to tell you. You can review the writing guide. Grammarly. All of your papers, with the exception of discussion posts, will be run through Grammarly. And primarily, I will be looking to see if your critical thinking is up. If your critical thinking is down, there is a tab that says plagiarism. And that will tell me that you took too much information from the sources you discovered from your research and that you need to have more critical thinking. Your critical thinking is the key thing that's going to get you good grades. It's the key thing that's going to help you to be successful in your employment field. Then utilizing the writing lab. And then how to make corrections to the draft after I let you know those kinds of things. And The key thing is making sure that you satisfy these points. And I already talked about tutors. Then, to help you with APA, there's a whole section. There's a whole section here. Oops, before we get to that. On APA, you go to guides and APA. It'll take you right there. There's videos. There's all kinds of things that help you. Many students lose points because they fail to provide the APA requirement. In order to provide the APA requirement, it's citations and references, not references or citations. I cannot tell you how many individuals lose 5 points right off the bat, and you'll see that in the rubric that we talk about. So now, let's get into the announcement. I sent you this welcome announcement to welcome you to the course, and I recommend that you, I'm going to keep this available pretty much through the quarter, so you'll be able to see it. This first week in the student lounge, you'll see mine there already, and you can reply to others. It helps you get to know each other. And then check your course email frequently. A lot of students don't do that. Check your course email and then reply to my welcome email, which you'll see in there as well, and some of you have. The syllabus, we're going to go over that in just a few minutes, and we're going to concentrate on a few issues with that. Your calendar, we're going to go over that in a minute. And always get into the habit of checking out your calendar. The whole calendar is already there for you for the whole quarter, for the whole 5.5 weeks. And it gives you due dates and information there, okay? If you have any general questions that anyone can answer these questions, posted in the general course questions, which is found under discussions. And you'll see that under the section there where we talk about the student lounge, as well as right in that area. Your resources tab, again, I have so many resources from the resources tab already in the course that you may or may not use the resources tab. But where's the resources tab? Here it is right here. Whoops, let me move this out the way a minute. It's a little big here. Okay, let's go back up to the top. Here it is, all the way at the corner, right next to the calendar. So that's your resources tab. And if you go on your resources tab, it will click on, I'll just show you a second. Let's make this smaller. Okay, that is too big. Let me make this smaller. Oh, here we go. I don't know why it won't get smaller. Oh, there we go. There we go. Get it smaller. So anyway, you see all the things I was talking about. The APA guide, Grammarly. How you can set it up for grammar, spelling, and your plagiarism checker. And then it tells you other things in here, as well as how to deal with the appointment. Then it also talks about transferable skills. And we have 6 transferable skills, which I'm going to briefly talk about tonight, that are so important to you. And we call them transferable skills for a reason. Anyway, I'll elaborate on that in a minute. And then it talks about other things in here. It tells you who the librarian is for your school. So this one is the one you would be using, Dennis Johnson, and so forth and so on. So there's and then there's also a guide in here that leads you directly to goes to your own criminal justice section as well. So it'll help you to find those things. Okay. All right. So that's as small as they're going to go. So now let's go back. Okay, let's go back to this. So then your report tab, that's where you check your grades, and you're able to check your grades on a regular basis. And then there's some APA information, and then this is a reminder about the lectures that I've already talked about. Okay, and then these are other things. The Get Started folder helps you to know also the full modules every week, which you have access to every module anyway. And that's the welcome announcement. Okay, so I'm going to make that smaller right now. But now I want to concentrate on the week one. Each week you will receive an announcement, and in this week, the first week, Module 1, psychoactive drugs, categories, effects on the body, classification of controlled substances. You're going to read chapters 1 and 2 of Drugs, Crime, and America. That's your textbook. Now, I sent you previously by email the PowerPoints, which you should save, print up, maybe even have them for notes during the time that you are going through the lecture as well, because I won't do all the PowerPoints during the lectures in this course. And then this gives you your schedule lecture for this week, and then it tells you again that beginning next Tuesday. So don't try to go to a lecture next Thursday. There won't be one. It's going to be Tuesday, and every Tuesday thereafter until we get to week 6. Okay, but you'll hear me reminding you throughout the quarter. Be sure to participate in a discussion assignment, classification of drugs and controlled substances. The initial post is due yesterday, and the reply post due this Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Finally, there is a timed quiz. Hear me? Timed quiz. I do recommend that you take the quiz at the end of the week. That way you will have gone through the materials, and you're going to be subjected to a time period. You can't have notes in front of you. You should not. That's a violation of academic integrity anyway. So you won't have enough time to go through and do it anyway. Maximize your points on this. You'll see why in a few minutes. And then this is a reminder about what's taking place right now. And then you'll see this every week. Let's start strong and finish strong. Trust me, 5.5 weeks goes before you know it. My motto is adversity is the springboard to success. I will close out by explaining that to you a little bit more in detail. But now let's take a quick gander before we get to the syllabus, the calendar, and here we go. The course calendar. Let me move this up some. Okay. So now you see the calendar. You see when we started. It said initial post Wednesday. So it should have been Tuesday. But for those who get it in on that Wednesday, which is today, I won't penalize you this week. But after this, it's going to be Tuesdays, okay? So I'm going to give you some grace points. For those who didn't do them yesterday, get them in tonight by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, because after tonight, I will be deducting a point for each day that it's late, okay? All right. Then the lecture is taking place right now. Your reply post is due Saturday, and then your quiz, and it tells you when it is due. Now, There is no written assignment outside the quiz this week. Next week there will be, but not this week. And so therefore you can focus on the materials that are given to you. You notice next week your reading assignment is given to you on Monday and every Monday thereafter, and your initial post, and then your live lectures will take place in the same thing. And you see it goes all the way down, follows the same process all the way down till we get to, and I'm just going to flick over to you so you can just see it, okay, until we get to, this is week 5 right here. And you'll notice what I told you. See, there's a lecture here, and there'll be a lecture on June 8th. Then your reply post will be due for that week 5, and then your course project, and then your written assignment. Actually, this is not supposed to be in here. I don't know why this is even in here. That J250. That's not even supposed to be in there. But anyway, yeah, let's take that out of there. Let's delete that. Whoops. Let's do that. It'll be gone in a second. Okay, now it's gone. So anyway, so then you get to this final week. Your last day of class will be the 12th. And that's when your final exam will be due, your initial post, reply post. And it says right here that the quarter officially ends. Okay? So that's just a preview of what's coming in the future. So all that being clear, let's go now and let's look at the syllabus. The syllabus, of course, is the contract for the course. And a lot of students don't even look at the syllabus. They never look at it. But I always go through it, some important parts of it in this open house. First of all, my name, phone number, there's an email address which you can email me. If you send it to me without the 2, I will still get it. But that's my personal email. Then this is a reminder of what you saw on the course homepage. Okay? I'm not going to go over this course description, prerequisites, things like that. I'm going to go down straight to, we already talked about discussions, so you understand that you are to make sure that you do your discussion posts in details, and then little short answers are not going to be acceptable, okay? And you know the due dates. I already told you that. All right. So in this course, you'll have readings, your discussion posts, quizzes, course project, and then a final exam. And then your live lectures, we've already talked about that. Now let's get down here. Again, there's that additional information that I tell you about, you know, your textbooks being the only source and about APA requirements. Now, let's get down here to grading criteria. Grading criteria. Notice the way that this operates. There are 365 points. The biggest portion is your course project, which constitutes almost half of your grade, 43.9. And then the next one is quizzes. So it behooves you to do well on your quizzes. And you're going to have quizzes every week, except when you have your final exam. That is a different one. So you get 60 points for your discussions. That's making sure you satisfied the requirements. Your quizzes, they are graded automatically. Your course project, we have the rubric we're going to go over in a few minutes. Then your final exam, 40 points. This could be the difference in passing, failing. This could be the difference in A, B, or C. And then your live classroom requirements, that it's important that you complete those in order to get those 30 points, okay? You get 5 points for each week, and that's 6 weeks of live lecture, so that's 30 points. That's for a total of 365. Now, let me make this announcement right now. My goal is to get you an A and B's. I don't even talk about anything under that. Therefore, take note of this. You should never ask me, Professor Wright, Dr. Wright, Richard, Mr. Wright, what do I need to do to get a C in your course? I will not answer that for you. I'm telling you up front. And the reason why is because I don't tell you how to be average. You determine that yourself. But personally, if it was me and you want to excel in your profession, you're going to shoot for A's and B's. Remember, you want to ultimately take what you learn here and transfer it into being a good criminal justice professional. And so as a result, those that are C students, they're not going to do as well in terms of employment opportunities as those who get A's and B's. And then as you go further with your associates to your bachelor's, and then you decide to go to grad school, and then if you decide to do what I did, go to law school, and you end up going to a law school like I went to Northwestern University School of Law, which is pretty top school in the country. Supreme Court justices come from there, governors, mayors, all kinds of big business people, owners of teams. Chicago White Sox owner Jerry Reinsdorf, and Bulls owner, he's a graduate of Northwestern. Jerry Springer, the TV individual, was mayor of Cincinnati. He graduated from Northwestern Law School. So how did I get in there? Because when I was in school, I stayed in the A and B's. And you'll hear me talk about that a little later. But don't ask me about it. Don't ask me, can you miss work and do extra work? It's an oxymoron to me for you to say I didn't complete the work, but I want to do extra work. You can't do something extra when you haven't done what you already needed to do. And so, do I accept late assignments? Yes. Do I take points off? Yes. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the point of the matter is you can always turn in an assignment, and then I will give you feedback about that late assignment. Okay? We're going to talk a little bit more about my rule, though, about late assignments. My participation is that I'm to respond to messages within 48 hours. Very rarely do I do that. I always respond to them in less than 24 hours. I don't like my inbox full, and I respond pretty quickly. I have had students to send me a message, and before they can get their thoughts all the way in and they send it to me, then I responded back, and then they say, oh, I got more to add to it. They're surprised I answered that fast. That's how I try to answer. My instructor information is on the syllabus, and then I'm doing the live lectures. Okay? Now, let's talk about transferable skills. I already indicated that there are transferable skills. Now, the title transferable skills means these are skills that we've identified that are transferable from your educational experience to your professional experience. And what employers are looking for, they're looking for people who are proficient in these transferable skills. And so during the course of your assignments, whether you realize it or not, you're going to be applying these transferable skills in completing your assignments. One of the first ones is communication. Employers are looking for good communicators. You're going to have to be able to communicate with people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, languages that you don't even understand. You're going to have to be able to reach them one way or the other. And communication is very, very, very important in all fields, but especially in criminal justice. Written and oral communication. You must be proficient in written and oral communication. Why? Well, for example, as a lawyer, I can tell you that your communication in court is very important. Written, because the fact that we will use your reports, how you created them, whether they were accurate, whether they were grammatically correct, and the information that's on there can make or break a case. So it's very important that you be proficient in communication. I am a professional communicator, having been a lawyer. I am a pastor of a church, so I communicate that way. I've been a teacher many years. I did radio, I did television, and all of those kinds of things where I've had to reach people. So I'm a professional communicator, and it's very, 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 very important. I would say to you that those who are great communicators are on their way to being successful in any endeavor, but especially in CJ, criminal justice. Critical thinking. Critical thinking involves sharing your thoughts, your ideas, the processes, using this gray matter up here to be able to demonstrate how you can apply the issues of the assignments to the facts and elaborating on them. It's not whether or not I agree with you, but even if I don't agree with you, at least provide some rationale and some support. Your critical thinking is also supported by not just having your statements, but statements that tie into someone who is an expert in an area. If you're going to cite a case, for example, I want to see it cited correctly. If you're going to cite a publication, cite it correctly. If you're going to cite a statute, cite it correctly. But your critical thinking is something that comes from within you that gives your ability to be able to take something and think out of the box, so to speak, and be able to provide solutions to problems that are presented to you. You're going to have to do that on a regular basis. You already probably been doing it. I'm a natural critical thinker because I went to law school. We have this method called a Socratic method, where we are thrown a series of questions and we provide answers to the questions, and then another question comes. Eventually, a light bulb comes on and we get to the root of the issue. And that's what I'm going to be looking for in your papers. And trust me, I read your papers. I got a lot of papers, but I go through them and I look for certain things. And I'm going to be making sure that I look for your critical thinking. When I run your papers through Grammarly, it'll tell me whether or not there's a lot of critical thinking. If your percentage is above 25%, which is too high already, the average should be 10 to 15%, then that means you're using less critical thinking and more copy and pasting, or more ideas that someone else has already presented and you haven't presented enough of your own ideas. So critical thinking. Critical thinking. My favorite, critical thinking. Digital fluency. Everything is digital now. You have to be able to utilize all kinds of systems. I am 68 years old as of a week ago today, and when I came out of school, there was none of this stuff. But I am fluent in digital fluency. I can use the laptop. I can use these different apps. I'm an Android person. I don't know much about Apple at all. But I'm very, very adept at being able to do things using Word, using spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheets, and all other kinds of resources out there. Your books now are digital. When I was in school, we didn't have digital. We had these big, bulky books that we had to carry. But you want to be fluent in this because that's the way you're going to be operating in the real world. Technology is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Diversity and teamwork. Let's take diversity first. Diversity means that you have to learn something very important about people that are from different walks of life, race, sex, religion, sexual preference, national origin. You may not agree with them, but you have to respect them. You have to be able to appreciate people that are different from you, and that you need to be able to be open-minded enough that your way is not the only way. For example, the way that I worship is not the same way that everybody worships. And the language that I speak is not the same language that everybody speaks. And, even the culture is different for each of us. Respect them. Don't make a joke or criticize individuals. We believe in diversity and inclusion at this school. We believe that people should be able to be comfortable and free to be who they are. Now, let me just say this. In your field in criminal justice, you're going to come across people who speak Spanish, for example. And if you don't speak Spanish, you're going to have to be able to communicate with that person. You're going to have to deal with that person. And you can't assume anything about that person. Another issue is this: people of different races. Unfortunately, the statement I'm about to make, I have run across it with studies dealing with law enforcement, is that there are people who have certain ideas about black males and believe that black males are criminals in instances where they are not. Crime is not a race thing, it's across the line. But you got to be able to, as a law enforcement person, appreciate and understand the individuals. Don't be afraid of a person because their color is different from yours, their culture is different from yours. You don't understand it, they're labeled to you as odd. They're not odd. You are odd to them. But the point of the matter is here's the policy that I always tell my students. I love everybody. The only people I don't love, and you'll listen to me very carefully, and I hate these people, that when I cut them, their blood is not red. Think about that. Think about that. I know my nursing people and say the blood is really blue. I says, I know, but when it hits the oxygen, that's when I see it. It's red. And so it doesn't matter if you're from another country or any of those kind of things. So far, I can't say another world. But anyway, you understand what I'm saying. People in this class, when your colleagues present ideas, don't insult them. If you're going to disagree with them, let them know. Let them know why you disagree with them. Give good reason. Don't shoot them down, but present your positions, but respecting theirs. Teamwork. You're going to be working with teams at all times, and you're going to find yourself in situations that there's no lone rangers. There's nobody working by themselves. We all working in teams. In this class, yes, you are individuals, but we're going to be working as teams. One of the ways you work as teams is in your discussion posts, your discussion forum, and helping each other and communicating, encouraging each other, not discouraging each other. And that you're going to find that in any area that you work in, team, man, we have so many meetings. Sometimes I say we have a meeting for the meeting that took place because there's some team issues. When we talk about in terms of the school, I'm in academics. I was at one time in leadership where I was a program coordinator. And then we worked with the admissions team. We worked with the academics, who was us. We worked with the advisors. We worked with the financial aid. All of them, we come together to help you to be successful. Career finders. We have people who do that as well, help you with your careers as well. Working together as a team, and that's what you want to develop, that habit now. Ethics. Ethics is so important. I stress ethics to my students. I says you start with ethics, you have ethics in the middle, and you have ethics at the end. And I've taught ethics in criminal justice, ethics in business, ethics in medicine, and I've taught all of them. And ethics are so important. In fact, there was an article today in the paper, and I might send you guys that link later, where 2 police officers are now under arrest and charged with lying to the court, providing false affidavits, and taking money from drug dealers and making false reports. Well, guess what? Those guys are headed to jail. So ethics are so important. You start here in school with the ethics in terms of taking your exams. We're not at your house to see, but I can tell you this. A student that goes through and says a lot of times, I can only get 2 done. I know why. Because you're trying to find the answers. You can't do that. You put your books away and work on that basis. Professional responsibility. Every organization has responsibilities as to how you operate. And if you're going to be working for a specific agency, you're going to learn that it is very important that you follow the responsibilities of that agency, whether you're a lawyer, a police officer, whether you're a defense attorney, whether you're a prosecutor, whether you're a judge, whether you're a probation officer, parole officer, whether you work in forensics, or any area that you work in, you're going to have a code of professional responsibility that you're expected to live up to. And we teach you in school that you operate as a professional when you are going through these classes. That's why as you do your projects, you're going to be interacting with individuals who are already working in the field, whether it's corrections, probation, parole, law enforcement, forensic, any of those kind of things. So then information literacy, you have to be able to find information. You have to be able to do research. And while I'm talking about it, which you'll see it in the rubric, don't use Wikipedia. Never use Wikipedia. Use Wikipedia, you're going to lose points. Wikipedia is a very unreliable source and is not credible. Also, be very careful in some of your papers if you use how should I say, organizations to present your position without any clear research. Let's say, for example, if you're doing a paper on whether dairy milk is bad, and you use a report that says milk is good, and that you provide a whole lot of information in your paper, and then you cite that it was produced by the dairy farmers of America. Duh, what do you think? The same thing when you're dealing with any issues in criminal justice. There are going to be information and details on both sides. Some of the greatest sources are law reviews, or there's publications from the professions that you operate in. Of course, the best are the cases and the statutes for the jurisdictions. And if you're like me, I learn what the history of these things are to help me understand. And so information literacy is so important. Okay, we're just about done with this part. Okay, now let's talk about, well, the academic integrity policy. You can take a look at that yourself. But here's the late assignment. Assignments may be submitted up to 7 days, but 10% comes off up to 24 hours late, an additional 10% for each day. So let's start, for example, saying this, that if your assignment is due on Sunday, and then it's a 40, okay? And then you miss 3 days. Well, then you lost 12 points. You lost 12 points just for lateness. I don't care how good the assignment is. Now, it is so important that you get your assignments done on time. It says here that instructors may waive the late penalty in extenuating circumstances as determined by who? Me. I am very fair at that. Students who are in this class now that have been in other classes of mine will say, Professor Wright bends over backwards with you and gives you consideration. But don't try to play me. I had a student that I determined quite clearly what their operation was, and they ran into a serious problem. I've had students who ran into some very serious problems throughout the quarter, and including losing a loved one. I had a student, for example, who had just started out about the third week of class. This was when the 11-week class I was teaching. Her dad died suddenly, and I reached out to her by calling her. She was surprised I called her to talk to her. And I gave my condolences first because I think life is important, and for us to consider and recognize the fact that life happens and that you're going to have times when things happen and why things are late. However, don't tell me things like I had to work overtime a lot. I tell students it's time management. This whole issue is time management. I've been there in your shoes, and we'll talk about that at the end. But the fact of the matter is I'm an empathetic individual and very sympathetic. However, I am not going to, as I say, spoon feed you because it's a bad habit for me to do that, number one, because of the fact that you're going to have to be able to stand up. Because I'm not going to be around always, as your parents have already shared that with you before, and you're parents yourselves, and you've had to share that with your kids. So I'm going to be fair, okay, and when it comes to dealing with those issues. But I got to know. I'm not going to have a crystal ball. I'm not going to be trying to figure out what's going on. You're going to have to let me know. All right. And so in no circumstances is a student allowed to submit work after the last day of the academic term unless an incomplete grade has been requested. Incomplete grades are something that I hardly ever use by students. It has to be some really bad situation. I had a student who in the last week, this was when the flu was really bad, and they got real sick and was hospitalized. And that person got an extended period to be able to get their assignments in, and then they were able to do it. But I can only extend it one time by the rule. So don't even count on that. Okay? There's an incomplete grade policy down here which I don't go over, and I let students know about that. Okay? So now we got a lot more material to go, and we only got 7 minutes. I told you it's going to be longer. So hang on in there, because this week is more introduction to you. All right, so now, again, let's take a look at the assignments. I've already told you about how they're laid out. You're going to have to make sure that you follow the instructions of these. So your initial post tells you what to do. It tells you what to do in your reply posts. Follow them, and then follow these bullet points. I'm going to be looking at them to see if they are as I read through them. Citations and references are good, but not required. Okay? I do encourage students to reply to more than one post, but a minimum of one post, and that you should make sure you provide information that is credible. It says be sure to include proper citations in your post as a source you relied upon for information. Again, I recommend highly that you do that. Don't just use the textbook. I already said that. Get other sources as well and provide those and information. All right? So that's the reply post. Then you have your quiz. It's a 30-minute quiz. In other words, you'll have one opportunity, and time will move. You'll be noted when there's 5 minutes, 1 minute, and 30 minutes. Once the time expires, the grade will be automatically submitted. By taking this exam, you agree to abide by the academic misconduct policy set forth in the syllabus. I already talked to you about that, okay, and what the consequences could be, and then your live lecture. Okay, now, so we're not gonna go over that, but I'm gonna show you something in a few minutes. So now let's go back and let's spend some time talking about the lesson. Now, I am not going to go over the lesson in as much detail as I will in my other lectures I'm going to do, which means I usually will cover the Controlled Substance Act section, this section, this section, this section. But I'm going to spend a great deal of time on the introduction to the course project, which starts actually with your first assignment in week 2. So I'm not going to spend time going over Schedule 1, Schedule 2 drugs, Schedule 4 drugs, 5, and so forth. I'm going to let you go through and look at that yourself this week. I do say follow these activities. Match the drug to the correct schedule and, see what schedule that it goes to. Just to show you an example, I already know what's going to happen when I do this. It's going to kick it out. Oh, it is. Peyote. Oh, okay. That's because it is. Oh, yeah, I forgot what that is. That's some stuff. So you put it in, and it'll tell you if it's correct. So peyote is a Schedule 1. PCP. I knew that one already. Steroids. So steroids, you already know, is a 3. And then Valium is a 4. Okay? And so then you go to the next, and you can do it all the way through. So I'm not going to do all of those, but those are good exercises for you as well. Narcotics, amphetamines. What are narcotics? What are amphetamines? What is cocaine? What is marijuana? We're going to be talking about that in more detail throughout the weeks. Synthetic drugs. We're going to talk about those kinds of things as well. Well, back in the days, we used to have this stuff called purple haze. It was all kinds of stuff that was made up and manufactured as drugs. And, we're not going to go into those today. But look at that as well. So now let's talk about this. Now, pay attention, because this is how you're going to get your grades for your written assignments. And just pay attention to what it's saying here. Talks about opiate as one of the most abused illegal substances, and tell you where it comes from and so forth. And then says that they are synthetic drugs manufactured through chemical process, such as methadone, oxycodone, hydrocodone, fentanyl. And then when you work in this area, you're going to understand about heroin and opioids, okay? So in this course project that you will have, you're going to conduct research to learn about heroin, its effect on the body, how it's used, connection between heroin use, addiction, and crime issues related to overdose, which we'll be talking about in detail, as well as treatment and addiction issues. So this project is going to help you to see how the law enforcement aspects of it deal with the war on drugs, pretty much, okay? Dealing with use of drugs and efforts related to deaths from overdose. I'm going to be sharing with you something about that throughout the quarter. I had a sister that I lost in a situation like that, and almost all of us know somebody. So anyway, so you know what the essence of the assignment is. So it's going to tell you, though, each week specifically. It's divided into 5 parts, starting with week 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay? 5 parts. Now, here we go. What is heroin? I guess you say, wait a minute, there's only 4. Pay attention. What is heroin? That's going to be the assignment for week 2, which we're going to talk about during the lecture next week. Then week 3, heroin and crime, how it relates to crime. 4, heroin opioids, what the law enforcement perspective is. And number 5, heroin and addiction, one person's journey. Now, each part of the project must include a minimum of 3 credible and reliable sources. You cannot, you see that? Use your book as a reference for any part of this project. That's why I said you're going to have to do research. You cannot use Wikipedia. I already said that. You may include pictures in your paper, but doing so is not required. But 3 credible and reliable resources. You're going to see that in the rubric when you come to it. Now, this week, as I said, there is no assignment, but you can begin reading and doing research to learn more about the heroin epidemic. In Module 2, you will submit Part 2 of the course project. First, you'll research the path heroin follows from the poppy fields, where it comes from, to the streets, and write a paper describing what you learned using citations and references. Then for Part 3, it tells you. Then Part 4, and then Part 5. So the actual written part is from weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5. But the first week, the reason why it says 5 is because you want to begin reading and doing research. That's the key. That's why it says 5. Each assignment is graded independently, and you'll have a criteria, which I'm just going to take you and show you in a few minutes. So, if you have any questions, ask me, or post ideas in the general course questions, and then I'll be able to deal with those or anybody else. But that's the assignment. So you take it 1 week at a time, okay? That is the key. That is the key. That is the key. All right, now, I want to show you something just so you'll know. Just a preview. This is just a preview. Just going to show you. You get to your assignments, and then this is what each week is going to look like. It goes in and you read this, and it tells you how long the paper has to be. It tells you how many resources. Be sure to rely on credible resources, not your textbook. Do not rely or cite, once again, Wikipedia. It's going to be deadly to your grade. Okay? And then you're going to find yourself in a situation where you lose points. So it tells you. It's laid out right there. Now, here's something I want to point out to you. Very simple. What is heroin? Here's what you got to do. You click on your assignment. Tells you it's going to be due the 20th. Not this Sunday, but the 20th. And it tells you you get a possible 40 points. 40 points, okay? Now, here's your rubric. Your rubric is right there. It tells you you'll get 30 points if you do all of these things. Notice 3 credible resources other than the textbook. 5 points if you satisfy all of these, particularly meet the 3-page minimum length requirement and the other things in there. And then your APA citations. That's what you got to do. So it tells you in here what I'm going to be looking for. So you want to get all these points. You don't want to get, okay, just these points and then not meet this and lose some points here. So then if you don't do the APA, you're going to lose 5 points. So let's say, for example, if you don't do the 3 pages and the APA, but you do this up here, you just have provided an opportunity for you to lose 5, possibly 8 points. And instead of getting a 40, you'll get a 32. So you don't want that to happen. So I'm just showing you. Every assignment has that in there to help you. Okay? Any questions? Doesn't appear to be any. If so, type them in the chat box. And then I will address them. In the meantime, I'm going to just quickly show you what we have here in terms of these PowerPoints. Drugs, crime, and the system. It's an overview. And just going to go through them real quick. The history of drugs. These are very good PowerPoints. Drug use in the United States. Arrest and incarceration. Again, I'm going to go over them more in future lectures, but I'm not going to do it today because this is an overview. Connections among drug abuse, crime, and the criminal justice system. Continuing. And it only goes 6. So it's pretty short. It's not very, very, very long, okay? These PowerPoints are very good for outlines to help you. Now, this more talks about the drugs themselves and the use and abuse. Basic concepts about psychoactive drugs, effective dose, lethal dose. When you read your book, you'll see these in detail. Drug abuse and misuse, drug dependence and addiction, explains it. Okay. Factors influencing a drug's effect on behavior and moods, classes of drugs, and so forth. You'll know that already because that's in your module, classes 1 through 5. And then talk about some of the legal issues involved, like the no-knock searches, the different classes of drugs, which, by the way, marijuana, we'll be talking about that throughout the quarter, is heading in a more open direction, if you know what I'm saying. It's because it's being legalized. I just heard something today on Facebook. I was looking at two United States senators talking about a law that they're trying to introduce to allow marijuana to be legal on the federal level. You should be aware that though there are jurisdictions like Colorado, Illinois, let's see, a few other states, some out west, that have legalized marijuana. The point of the matter is that what's going to happen is that, and Illinois, by the way, is still in its working stages, but Colorado has had it for a while. And so anyway, the fact of the matter is that California has it as well. And you shouldn't be surprised to hear that one. And then the other thing is that the federal government, though, can still arrest you on a federal level for it. So because of what's happening with marijuana, on the state level, it's causing the federal government to take another look at it. So, and these are other synthetics, stimulants, cocaine, crack cocaine. When we start talking about crack cocaine, I'll have some discussions about that coming up in weeks to come. Okay, hallucinogens, PCP, angel dust, stuff like that, ecstasy, um, all kinds of different drugs. So anyway, the point of the matter is those kind of things we will be dealing with, okay, as well. So that's it for that week one. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and bear with me. It's going to be probably about 10 minutes or so. I'm trying to get it in as 10 minutes so you understand why I say adversity is the springboard to success. When I was 7 years old, which was a long time ago, 1957, my dad loved sports, and my dad took me to a White Sox baseball game, and we lived in Chicago in a pretty tough part of town called Lawndale on the west side of the city. And it's violent now, but it was pretty violent then as well. And on Memorial Day of 1957, my dad came home with me from the game. We went to bed. It was myself and 5 younger girls. I was the oldest one, being the 7-year-old. And when we went to bed, a fight broke out in the house. And when the fight broke out in the house, the man who was a roomer in the house, he ended up fighting with my dad into the room where us 6 kids were laying in the bed. And the lights were flicked on. Well, this man got my father pinned into a corner, took out a switchblade, and stabbed my father in the forehead right in front of me and my 5 sisters. I have a photographic memory, so I'll never forget that. And the blood was just pouring down from his head. I'll never forget it, that picture of what I saw. Whenever I see pictures of some movies where they show Christ and the blood flowing down, that reminds me of what happened in that room with my dad. Needless to say, this guy ended up leaving the house. A few days later, he was back in the house. This time, he was sleeping openly with my mother. Now, I didn't understand this, but I would find out years later what happened is that the case was dismissed because they didn't have evidence to say that the man actually was the aggressor in the fight, and he ended up stabbing my father. Well, the person who who provided the information to the police was my mother. She was in love with this guy. And I found out years later that it was because she was having an affair with him. And so my father was killed right in front of us. After that, the guy lived in the house with us. From 1957 to 1962, that guy living with my mother put us through hell. I grew up at that time in a home of domestic violence. The man used to beat her so bad. He beat her so bad. I mean, he really beat her. There were times when movies that would come on TV like The Burning Bed, What's Love Got to Do with It, I couldn't watch those movies. And the reason why I couldn't watch those movies is because of the fact that I would remember what happened, or I could see myself as a kid. Our WGN TV Channel 9 here in Chicago locally was running a series on domestic violence this past week, and I had my wife and my son to sit down, and they were looking. My son's 23, and my wife and I sat, and I just looked at it, and I told them, please sit here with me, and I wanted them to see, and they were showing graphic pictures, and I explained to them I lived that on a regular basis for several years. In fact, I found out there was no Santa Claus because the guy got upset with my mother and sat us kids down on the floor and tore off the hinges of a closet with his bare hands. He was a strong guy. And from top to bottom, there were toys in that closet. And he pulled them out while he was cursing and yelling out, "I'm Santa Claus." And he took an axe and chopped up all of those toys, including that fire truck, in front of us. That's the kind of life I lived. And in the meantime, my mother, she got pregnant and had another child by him. So that left me with 6 sisters. And then the area got so bad over there where I was living that the gangs were just going at it. However, the gangs did something, and I've written about this, something very unusual. They knew about what had happened to me and my father, and they made a pact, 2 opposing gangs, that they would not recruit me because I was the sole surviving male in the family. They knew about this other guy, but they didn't count him. They counted me. And so even though I had a past, they weren't bothering me. My mom decided it was time to go in 1962. So we left that part of town and moved into a beautiful community in Gary, Indiana, which was nice. A single family house that we had. They had little league grass and everything. It was really, really nice. Well, my mother got pregnant and had another child, and this too was a girl. So thus I had 7 younger sisters and no brothers. Well, an aunt came from Michigan to stay with us, and he didn't do anything to my mother there. He didn't bother her because she carried a pistol in her purse. I always tell people she reminded me of this character that Tyler Perry has called Medea, and that she was like that, and she was serious. She didn't take stuff, so he didn't do anything during that period. And then in early '63, he left. She left to go back to Michigan, to go back with her husband. Well, Memorial Day of 1963, recalling that Memorial Day of '57 is when my life changed. But Memorial Day of '63, my mother left the house, and she told me, make sure I take care of everything, and I did. And she left. So I woke up the next morning, and early in the morning, and there was smoke in the house. And then I saw the car pull away and from the house. And so I, went back and checked on the girls and checked in my mother's room. Her bed hadn't been slept in, but that wasn't unusual. And so what happened is that my mom wasn't there. So I let the smoke out of the house, proceeded through the day, taking care of the house. People started getting up. And then at some point, 2 gentlemen came to the door, and they announced themselves as police officers. And they came to the door, and they told me, they says, we have to talk to you. I said, you can't come in. They says, yeah, we need to come in. And when they showed their badges, I said, okay, come on in. And they came in and they said, you're the oldest? I said, yes. And the officers gave me the message. They said, Sarah Wright? I said, yes. Your mother, she's dead. And I just immediately lost it, guys. I just lost it. And then I had to quickly regroup because my sisters, including the baby who was still leaning on my mother. She had a security blanket and all of that. Um, I had to catch myself. So I started yelling this man's name, Scott, Scott. His name was Webster Scott. I started yelling his name, which, by the way, it took me years before I could even say his name after that day until many years later, because it wasn't that I couldn't. It was just hard to do. So at any rate, this man killed my mother as he had killed my father. We were brought from Gary back to Chicago to stay with an aunt in the south side of Chicago. This was my mother's sister. She didn't really want us there. She made us earn our keep. We had to scrub floors. I had to pull weeds with my fingers and hands. She had kids, so her kids were allowed to go to YMCA and do all kinds of things. We weren't allowed to do that, and it was pretty bad, pretty bad. In fact, my mom, when they had the wake, I went to the wake, and I saw her body, and I lost it. They had to take me out, and I couldn't even go to the funeral. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't go to any of that. They had to have someone stay with me at the house. So we stayed at that woman's house, my aunt, for many months. And then my aunt, the one who had come earlier, she came and she said she was going to take us away because they were talking about splitting us up. And she said, no, I'm not going to have that, and took us to a further area of Chicago called Morgan Park, Maple Park specifically, where she had a house built, and we moved into that house in 64. In 64, I would discover that the man, Webster Scott, had pled guilty, and I was told that he was going to be sentenced to 10 years. 10 years. And that's what he was going to end up serving in jail. 10 years. But quickly it was brought to my attention that 10 meant 5. And it was further brought to my attention that for good behavior he could have a year and a half cutoff. Thus, he would serve 3.5 years. And I was 14 at that time, and I was very troubled. It didn't make sense to me. It was really, 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 really bad. And I just, I would talk to people, and that was a no-no, and ask people what can be done. And that same time, I met a lady that I just heard on the radio, and I went and found her and asked her to be my mother. And this 14-year-old kid, who at that time was a little kid, 14-year-olds are bigger now, went to her and on her job, and she said, I'll be your friend. And she remained my friend for many years. And then jumping ahead way years later, after I was grown and a lawyer, we went to court and made it legal, and she legally adopted me after having been around me for all of my years from 14 years old. But anyway, back to 14. Someone finally said to me, well, that's just the way it is. That's the way the legal system works. Lawyers are responsible for this. And I said, well, tell me about lawyers. And they started telling me. The only lawyer I knew about was Perry Mason I had seen on television. So I went to school and asked the librarian for a book on lawyers. And she says, I have a book on lawyers, attorneys. And I checked the book out and read that book from cover to cover as a 14-year-old. And after I read that book, the next day, anybody I met, guys, I said, my name is Richard Wright, and I'm going to become a lawyer. That was me. Immediately after I said that, my aunt, the one that I lived with at first, she said, you're shooting too high. You don't have what it takes. But here's what I did. I never told her anything. I don't believe in telling people, I'll show you. I believe actions speak louder than words. So anyway, I had other people trying to discourage me. Even when I went to school, I was in high school, the counselors tried to tell me you should go and work on cars or be a carpenter. But I was respectful and listened to them, but I didn't. I was a student when I was in high school. I wasn't the top of the class. I wasn't the bottom of the class. I was in the upper part of the class, but I had my struggles. For example, I had trouble in algebra trig, where I took my lunch period to take an extra class so that I could pass it, and I did. But other than that, I did pretty well. So anyway, I ended up going on to school. I had a teacher who encouraged me. He was a debate team leader. He said, "You're a very good communicator." He says, "You want to be a lawyer? Don't let anybody stop you." So anyway, I ended up the aunt and uncle that I was living with. I ended up finding out that they had done something. I didn't find this out until I was a grown man in my 30s, but they had illegally adopted me because I wanted to keep my name because I was the only one who could carry on the name. My sisters were all adopted, and their last name changed. But I never used it. So I ended up getting married right out of high school, and I took a job in a big law firm that one of my friends had a friend whose mother was a secretary for a big law firm, and they got me a job in their mailroom. And when they got me the job in their mailroom, I started school in a junior college at night that was called Loop College, City College of Chicago. Now it's called Harold Washington. And I started in school, and then I did something that a lot of people discouraged me from doing, but I still did it. I got married right away, and then started having kids. I had two back to back, 71 and then 72. They're 47, and the other one will be 46 in a couple more days. At any rate, I continued on through school at night and working 40 hours a day in the law firm. When I got to the law firm, I introduced myself to all the lawyers, and I told them, I said, "My name is Richard Wright, and I really have a desire to become a lawyer." And they would smile, and I would pay attention to things that I was doing. I was actually introduced to a gentleman because I took a package to him. He was one of the clients of the law firm, a gentleman by the name of Ray Kroc. Some of you may not even know that name, but he was the founder of McDonald's, and he ended up making me his personal messenger from the law firm. Because what I used to do, guys, is in the mailroom, the guys would dress casually. I would wear a shirt and tie every day. And people took note of that, how I conducted myself, how I carried myself. I kept myself groomed and everything. And I answered, yes, sir, no, sir, and in a professional ways, talking to these people. So in the meantime, I ended up at the law firm. And by the way, I didn't have a car. I used to have to be at work at 8:30 in the morning, and so I would get up early in the morning, get on two buses and one train to be at work at 8:30. I had books, and I mean big books I had to carry. I had two big cases the law firm gave me because they saw what I was doing and just gave them to me to carry my books in. And I used to study on the train. I would get out of work at 4:30, 4 o'clock, and have to be in class at 4:30. And so I would immediately rush across downtown to get to class and get out at 10 o'clock. Then I'd get on the train, the L train, not the regular train, where people were selling stocks, shooting craps, and police were chasing people, and I would be studying on those trains. And I would study and oftentimes fall asleep at the end of the line, but I still studied. Then I'd have to take two more buses home, get home, grab a little something to eat, say hi to everybody, and then get back into my studies, and then go to bed and get up and repeat the same thing. And I did that, guys. But I stayed on the dean's list. I stayed on the honor roll. I studied hard. And I would fall asleep sometimes with the books. And so finally, the law firm saw me working like that, and they made me a file clerk. And then they said the law librarian, something has happened to him. He's passed away. We need somebody. Would you be interested? I said, of course. And I took the job in the law library. And my job was to be a custodian of the books. But when I was in there, I used to sit and I would listen to them talk, the lawyers. And then I would see how they were doing research, just paying attention to how they were doing it. Didn't have computers then. They were doing it manually. And I taught myself how to do that. And then one day, one of the lawyers was talking about some cases, and he went to lunch. And I knew what he was talking about because I had listened so much. And I went and pulled all those cases from the shelf, stacked them up, and put a yellow legal pad over them and said, do not disturb. So the lawyer came back from lunch, and I was sitting there at my desk eating my sandwich because I didn't go anywhere that day. And he says, Richard, I can't find any of the cases on point for what I'm looking for. They're all empty on the shelf. I says, come with me. And I went and opened the section where the books were. And I said, on that table over there. He says, who did that? I said, I did. He says, come with me, and took me to one of the bosses. And the boss said, you know what? We're wasting our money on this kid. He can research. He knows how to do stuff that we learn how to do later on. And so they made me what's now called a paralegal. I was a law clerk, and I started writing memos and briefs and researching, and hired someone to take care of the books. In the meantime, I had left junior college and had gone to a four-year institution called Roosevelt University, majoring in political science, minoring in business. And I stayed on the dean's list again, doing the same thing. I went through a lot of changes, guys, during those periods, and studied hard. Ran into financial problems because things got tough. But listen to this. So anyway, came to the point that it was time for me to decide law school, and I said Northwestern. They said, you need to apply to 3 law schools at least. I said, I'm not applying to 3. I'm applying to Northwestern because that's where I'm going to go. I wasn't cocky. I was just sure that that was going to happen. So I ended up applying to that school. Now, listen to me. The application was about 8 pages long. And so I filled that out, but I had other information in there. When the package was submitted and sent, one of the lawyers who taught over there says, do you want me to take this to him? I said, yes. It was a big box, and he took it over. He said, what's in here? Some books or something? I said, no, it's some information I want the admissions committee to consider. So the admissions committee got that information, and they contacted me and reached out to me, and they said to me something. They said, we don't do this, but would you come for an interview at the school? And I did. And I sat in a room and was interviewed by 3 or 4 people asking me questions about the stuff I wrote. I talked about my experiences I had gone through challenging. I talked about how I was chosen by the college, Roosevelt, to be what they call a Lincoln Academy Award winner, where I was sent to Springfield out of 5,000 graduates that were coming up to represent the school and receive a medal and be enshrined. And even today, it's called the Lincoln Academy. And the class of 75, you'll see my name next to it etched into the wall. Anyway, they heard me talk about all the different challenges I had. And then they said to me, well, okay. And they got together and they came back and said, we can't officially tell you this, but we'd love to have you in our school and you'll be hearing from us very shortly. About a week later, I got a letter being accepted into the law school. And I was so excited. I just, it was just exciting. But they told me something. They says, now when you get accepted in this school, the first year of law school is so much work. You can't work. So my spouse that I had at that time, my first wife, she graduated in 75 as I did. She was a teacher. And she started teaching, and I started studying. Well, it turned out to be that was the year that something had not happened in Chicago that happened that year. They had a teacher strike, and we had no income, no money. Everything was really bad. Now, here I was trying to focus in law school and study. And so I found myself in a situation where I was just so discouraged that I went to one of the professors and I told her, I says, I think I'm going to have to leave. She says, I want you to come to my office after class and I'll talk to you. And I did. And I told the professor what I was dealing with. I told her, I says, we lost our electricity because we couldn't pay the electric bill. I said I was studying by candlelight. I said I had to send my kids, the two that we had at that time, to stay with their mother, their grandmother. And so anyway, she said to me, well, quitting is not an option. She says, everybody's going through some changes. And she made me stay in that room with her until I said to her I wasn't going to quit. And I stayed. And then 3 years later, I graduated from the law school. And to this day, she's still there now at the law school. We communicate now as well. So at any rate, I ended up getting my law degree. But during the time I was there, I met one of my classmates' father, who was a lawyer, top criminal defense lawyer, who was really just really good. And I told him, about my story. And he suggested to me something that was very odd, to me anyway, and to everybody. He says, if you want to learn about the criminal law system, don't be a prosecutor. He said, be a defense lawyer. And I respected him. And I started in becoming a criminal defense lawyer. But before that, I left a big law firm. I went back there, by the way, for 2 years. In 78 to 80, I was there, and I didn't like it, so I left. And so I took him up on it and became a criminal defense lawyer, and I was good at it. I was very good at it and was able to communicate with juries. I never had a problem with jury trials at all, never. And I was very, 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 very on point with being able to connect my cases with the jurors. And the judge, the lawyer who became a judge, suggested to me I go to California to participate in a seminar in 1984, National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. And when I got there, they put me in a section, and the guy that was teaching my section was a guy, and his name was John Cochran. 10 years later, I would see him on TV as Johnny, and that was I learned some stuff under him. And then we would reacquaint ourselves when he came to Chicago before he passed away to practice for a while here. At any rate, I was good, guys, at it. I ended up doing radio, creating a radio show called Know Your Rights, which was a play on words. I did some TV interviews and talk show things on TV. I did some writing, and I was in demand. And so I ended up doing all kinds of law for a while, entertainment, sports, radio, TV, represented some athletes. I did all of that kind of stuff. But my passion, of course, was criminal law. And so I ended up running into problems. My first marriage, got married a second time, And then my wife, her mother became the president or mayor of a small town in the south suburbs of Chicago, in the Chicago area, and I became the village attorney. And it was pretty dangerous there. So I said I need to carry a gun, and they said, no, you can't carry a gun. They said only law enforcement can carry a gun. So I said, well, I'll be part-time that. So I went to the academy and became a part-time police officer. And because there was some corrupt cops, the chief got indicted, and then a new chief came in, and he recognized that he could trust me and asked me to be his internal affairs investigator, and I did. So I was, and then I prosecuted for the village as well. So I did all of that. I was a paralegal, I was a defense attorney, I was a prosecutor, I was an investigator. I did all of that stuff. And so at any rate, I ended up doing that for 4 years, went through the academy, participated in drug raids, had training as a drug specialist, so I know a lot about law enforcement and drugs, and it was really tough. The town that I was in was called the crack cocaine capital of the south suburbs, still known as that. But at any rate, I had my training there. So I would end up in 91. So I ended up finding myself in a situation where the person I was married to that second time, we didn't hit it off because she was doing some crazy stuff. So we split. In the meantime, I went to seminary, 91 and 93, for Master Arts of Religion and got involved in that. And then in 2000, I decided to retire from being a lawyer. By this time, I had 4 kids, 4 girls. And so they're all grown now, and I have 11 grandkids from those right now as I speak. And one of them is in the process of graduating from Rasmussen at the end of this year. So anyway, I went through a lot, guys, but it was challenging. It was tough. I ran into all kind of adversity. I did tell you my car. I got my first car, by the way, when I was in law school. It was a beat-up car, and it got me through law school. It was really beat up. It was so beat up that the floor, you could look down and see the ground. It was really bad. But anyway, here's what I'm telling you. I went through all kinds of tough times to get my education. And then when I retired at 50 years old in 2000, pursue a career in ministry, I taught special education. I worked with tough kids. A few of my kids actually have been in touch with me in the last year or 2 years, and one of them actually became a criminal justice probation officer. She said that she kept hearing my voice from when she was in high school and how she was incorrigible. But anyway, I never knew the influence I had. But anyway, the point of the matter is that I presented myself professionally then. I ran some businesses. I ran a janitorial company. And then in 2011, I ended up finding out about this school, Rasmussen. Someone approached me to take a job as an adjunct professor to teach business law. I took the job at the Romeoville campus residentially, got accepted there, but I quickly let them know I was a criminal justice person, and I ended up there. And I ended up finding myself teaching criminal justice after that. And then they came up with this idea that said the program is going online. Well, I had to quickly see. Let me tell you something, guys. When a challenge comes before me, I run to meet the challenge, no matter how difficult, because it would benefit me. And so I ended up becoming an adjunct professor. And then I met the dean of criminal justice for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Then about 6 or 7 months later, the guy who was actually my boss resigned, as state program coordinator of the School of Justice Studies of Illinois, which would have him be responsible for the Romeoville campus, the Mokina Tinley Park campus, the Aurora campus, and the Rockford campus. And I applied for that position, and I became full-time and took that job. And then I stayed on that job and began teaching 3 classes, and then continuing to do that job until they changed the roles and did away with program coordinators. And then after that, teaching 5 classes. And since that time, I've been teaching 5 classes as I do now. And some of you have had me before. I had people that you knew before that. And so I still continue to express to students why adversity is a springboard to success to me. And so I encourage you to take the lead that I have given you. Be professional. My role is to produce professional, ethical, and educated criminal justice students. And that's what I pride myself, and I work hard. I am a student-oriented professor, but I don't spoon feed you because it does you a disservice. And so I wanted to take that time tonight to tell you this. I know it's a little late, but this is the last time you'll hear me talking about that. Anytime you want to listen to it, you can go back and listen to it so you'll understand the way I approach things. And so this is what you get. Professor Richard Wright, and I have a smile on my face most of the time, but trust me, I cry tears, I've shed tears and continue. But I want you guys to be good. As a instructor, I can tell you techniques that police officers have made mistakes at where I've embarrassed them in court. I've shown how reports have to be accurate. All the things that we talked about earlier, communication, written and oral. I taught courses on those topics. And so you have me here for the next 5.5 weeks. Take advantage of that and learn as much as you can so that when you get out of here, you'll be able to remember, hey, I had somebody who had challenges like I have. And if there's anybody out there who says they haven't had any challenges, you haven't lived yet. You either had some and you don't want to say, or you are having some now, you don't want to say, or you're going to have some. But at any rate, don't run from them. But prepare yourself to be the best at what you do. And so I'm going to say good night to you guys. I will see you, reminding you next week. Oh, yeah. I got to give you a key word, right? I haven't forgotten it. The key word is my favorite of the transferable skills. I said it several times. Critical thinking. Okay? So I'm going to say good night and hope to see you next Tuesday at 8:30. And then, like I said, we will be through by 9:30 then because we will be going through the material more. And if you have any concerns between that time, you know the rules about reaching out to me. So I'm going to say good night, unless there's, let's see if any questions. Let's see the chat box. Doesn't see anything in the chat box. Okay. So I'm going to just say good night and end this meeting. Have a good one.